This is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. And today we're kind of talking about a subject, I guess you'd subtitle it Getting Older. And what we're actually going to be looking at is multitasking and lost words. I was talking to some friends of mine in a restaurant and I asked the question about multitasking. And of course, everybody thought they were good at multitasking. And I started to question it in my mind and thought, well, what exactly is multitasking? Because it's an interesting thing. And so I did some research, and then this is the result of that research. We're going to be talking about the brain and the mind, and particularly talking about the brain. It's often good to talk about it using a bit of a model just to get the idea of things. So let's have a look at this. And basically, this is a model of a simple computer. Now, a simple computer, you can assume there's only one central processing unit. What is a central processing unit? It is the bit of the computer that does the work, does the calculations, orders things, does all that kind of thing. We've got several tasks coming in. I've listed them as tasks 1, 2, and 3. And there's also a memory, and you can see from the arrows it goes in and out of the central processing unit. Now, how does that work? Well, along comes task number 1, and the central processing unit starts processing that task. There's a problem though, isn't there? Because the central processing unit is now stuck on task 1. That means task 2, task 3 have got to wait. Sometimes that's not a good thing. Especially if, for example, task number 2 is a teeny weeny task that could be done like that. Well, it'd be good just to let it in so that it could complete itself. So the idea is then that we have a switching between tasks. So task number 1 works and works and works until it is still working on the task but no longer needs the CPU. So it's doing a search or something like that. That way you can let task number 2 in just for a second or two so it can complete its task, and then we carry on. Of course, what that means is that all the results that have been made in task number 1 are put into memory so that they can be restored so the task continues. Okay, but let's say task number 3 suddenly becomes a priority. It's an emergency task, it's safety or health or something like that that has to be done immediately. I'm sorry, I'm listening to the dog snoring. I'm hoping it's not going to come out too loud on the video, but we'll see. Anyway, so task number 3, suddenly it's an emergency, we want to do it straight away, so we shift task number 1 into the memory. Task number 3 can then go ahead until it's finished, and then task number 1 can come back in. So there has to be a kind of a priorities thing that work in as well. Now, okay, so the human brain is very capable. It's very capable of switching priorities. It's very capable of switching tasks. It's very capable of doing things that take a short period of time quickly to get them out of the way so that you can work on the longer tasks. The only thing is, though, the human brain is a single processing unit. So it can only actually work on one task at a time. There's a slight variation of that, which I'll get to later, but basically that's what it is. You can only work on one task at a time. Multiple tasks are stored in the memory, your memory, and they're prioritized according to importance or urgency. Task switching is carried out, so you can flip from one to the other, to the other, to the other. Because the brain is very capable, it's a very magnificent piece of biological machinery. It can shift from one to the other very fast, but it can't work on anything more than one task at a time. Now, the brain has finite processing power. So, for example, if you were to try and do 2 mathematical problems at once, try it. Do a little sum, 3 plus 1 minus 2 times 4, and then do another little sum, write it down, and then another little sum, 2 times 3 times 4 minus 7, something like that. Put them both in front of you and then try working on them both at the same time. I think it's unlikely you'll be able to do it. That's because the brain is only capable of doing one task at a time. So not multitasking, task switching. Okay? It can do things together where you've got different attention channels. So you can listen to a visual input at the same time as an auditory input, at the same time as perhaps a tactile input. But again, they have to be different. If it's using the same things, like watching two movies at once, you wouldn't be able to do it. You'd concentrate on one or the other, not two movies at once. What you can do is watch the movie and listen to the sound, because they're different attention channels. You get that? You can look at somebody who's talking and listen to someone else. You may find that happens in social gatherings and stuff like this, where somebody is talking about somebody interesting and the person in front of you is not. Kind of rude, but that's something that you can do because it's different attention channels. And the brain copes with too much information by only focusing on a part of it. So although you're taking in all the input that's around you through your senses, a lot of it you kind of ignore, or you kind of apply less attention to. So it doesn't use so much of the brain's power, the processing power. So it partly ignores it. Now, a good example of that is using the eyes, because in the eyes is a focal point, and it's the point that you see in detail, that you put all your focus in. Now, if you look at something right now, just like I'm looking at this camera, and I can see the rest of the room, but not in detail. I can see the front of the camera right there in detail, because that's the 1% that you actually focus on. I was surprised it was 1%. I always thought it was 10, but actually it's 1, according to my research, 1%. You are aware of all the other visual input, and if something moves outside of that focus, you probably then would turn your head or your eyes to look at it. But what that would do is bring the focal point in, that 1%. So you get that idea. You can focus on one voice in a crowd of people, but you can't focus on every voice in the crowd. And you can also do things like using music to filter out distractions because it blocks a channel and those kind of things. So that's ways that the task switching works and how it's facilitated by the brain, because the brain has limited power. But there's also, like I said, this non-focused monitor. So this is like you're focusing on the 1%, but you're still aware of what's going on, maybe to the outside of your visual, maybe 180 degrees up and down, 180 degrees to either side. For example, you could be cooking the dinner and you've got the baby in a bouncer and you hear when the baby makes a noise, even though you're concentrating on cooking the dinner. You can also get that maybe you're in a crowd and someone uses your name, and immediately your attention is drawn to that person in the crowd. Okay. Now the thing is, as I said, the brain is somewhat limited. Somewhat limited in the sense that it has limited memory. So I'm going to put a diagram up here in a moment and show that idea. So let's do that. Okay, now this diagram is quite a famous one. It's called the Atkinson and Shiffrin model. And the idea of the Atkinson and Shiffrin model is a simple, and I've modified it slightly, but it shows that you get input from the senses, and that passes briefly through a very small sensory memory, enough for you to just notice and then move on. For example, you're walking on the street, cars are passing you by, you see the cars, but they don't make an input. They're not an event you're going to store. However, if one of those cars crashes into another car, that would be an event you might store into your short-term memory. So you're constantly passing information through the sensory memory and then forgetting about it. Anything that gets passed to the short memory will stay in there for a short period of time. The sensory memory is very small, as I've mentioned, but the short-term memory is also limited. It can hold about 5 items, 5 events, whatever they are, 5 tasks or whatever, but it only holds them up to about 30 seconds. And after that, they are simply forgotten. You would need to refresh the items that are in your short-term memory if you want to keep them in there past 30 seconds. And then if you like, the clock would start again at 0 and count its way through to 30 seconds. So that's the idea of that refresh concept of constantly refreshing things that are in your short-term memory. Difficult, though, if you've got 5 things in your short-term memory. If there is something in your short-term memory that you think is important enough to remember, it then goes into the store. Through the store into the long-term memory. Now, the long-term memory will hold things for a long time, and they allow you to do long-term retrieval. However, things that are in your long-term memory may also fade away after time, as you've noticed when you kind of forget about things that are happening and over a period of time. But if they're important, you may have them really engraved on your mind, or you may refresh them. When you retrieve a memory, you bring it back into your short-term memory, and again you're back into that refresh, and then it gets restored and refreshed in the long-term memory. So it goes on and on and on like that. So I think what we've kind of achieved here is the idea that we are constantly not multitasking, we're constantly task switching from one task to the next, then perhaps back to the first, then onto another one, then onto another one, and back and forth. And we've got those tasks lined up in our short-term memory. And so the short-term memory holds them for about 30 seconds. And if it's an important event, then it will be put into the long-term memory. You get the idea. Now, I told you there was a little bit of this that kind of breaks that idea of you can't multitask, but only in a very interesting way when you start looking at the mind. See, the brain, in my opinion, is a physical organ. It's a lump of grey matter up here. That is a physical organ. It brings thoughts into the physical, so it creates, I don't know, enzymes, hormones, neurotransmitters, stuff like that. It's the mind that creates those thoughts, and the mind is functionally divided into 2 separate things. I'm just switching all these pictures and things. It's kind of exciting, isn't it? Into 2 things, the conscious and the subconscious. Okay. Now, there's a list of things here. I'm not going to go through this in detail because I've done it in other videos. A breakdown of the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Probably the one I did on hypnosis, which you can check out on my YouTube site. What I've done on this diagram is shown the conscious mind as a small circle and the subconscious mind is a much bigger circle, because the conscious mind is more powerful. Sorry, the subconscious mind is more powerful than the conscious mind. But it works kind of silently in the background somehow, because you're not consciously aware of what it's doing. So your heart's beating, that's controlled by the subconscious mind. Your pulse, so your pulse is working from the heart pulse. You breathe, that's a subconscious thought. You could force yourself to hold your breath. That would be a conscious decision, but after a while the subconscious would force you to breathe. It's as simple as that, because the subconscious is a lot stronger. Imagine that you're learning to ride a bicycle, and the first time you get on the bicycle, you've got to think consciously about everything you're doing. You've got to think consciously about holding onto the handlebars. You've got to think consciously maybe about working the brakes. You've got to think consciously of pushing the pedals, of steering, all those kind of things. But after a while of operating the bicycle, it becomes part of a learned process. So it goes part into the subconscious mind. The mind is still working, the subconscious mind, to ride the bike, to keep the balance, to turn the handlebars, etc., etc. But the conscious now can think about something else. So in fact, you are doing two tasks at once. One is riding the bike with your subconscious mind. Two is thinking about where you're going, you're going to see a friend, in your conscious mind. So that's two tasks at once. So that truly is multitasking. But it's because you're using those two different parts of your mind, the conscious and the subconscious. You get it. As I said, the subconscious takes care of learned tasks. So like riding a bike or walking or driving or breathing. And that means that the mind truly can multitask, but only in that case where you're doing one task from the conscious mind and one task from the subconscious mind. Now, I've mentioned, I think I've skipped a page here actually. No, I talked about the memory, didn't I? So then they come to the question, okay, so we're stuck with this thing. How do we then make things better for ourselves? As I said, as you get older, things slow down. So the transfer of information from the subconscious to the conscious, or from those different memories, the short-term memory and the longer-term memory, slows down a bit. Okay, so how can you make it better? As you get older, as things slow down, you get a decline in memory, you get a decline in processing speed and attention. And all these affect this idea of task switching. Now, stress is one of the things that affects task switching, because the priority of our thinking changes when we're under stress. We tend to deal with the more stressful items first and ignore the ones that perhaps should be worked on. These all affect the ability of ourselves to do task switching, stress. You can improve task switching by prioritizing and planning, by using technology, and this is a big one, because you've usually got something you can make a note of things or a list of items. Now, we talked about the short-term memory and the fact that it's got like 5 tasks in it and they have to be refreshed and so on. But if you wrote them down, you wouldn't have to do that. A lot of people will take a note down and put it on the back of their hand. I'll just say, I'll just write that down, phone number, put it on the back of your hand like this so you don't have to remember it. And then when you get to your phone book or whatever like this, you write it into the phone book. Or you put it into your phone. That's another way of doing things. In most modern cell phones, you've got a little notes area that you can do things like that and just write down a few things that you need to remember on the list. So actually you don't need to remember them, or at least they're there to remind you of the 5 things you need to do. You can also turn repetitive tasks into habits, so they require less of your conscious effort. So, for example, you could, you could be talking to your friend on a headset, like a Bluetooth or something, while digging the garden. Because digging the garden, you get a spade and you go that side, maybe at the back, dig the spade in, pick up the soil, turn it over. You can do that almost without thinking, or, should I say, using your subconscious mind. And your conscious can still be talking to your friend with your conscious mind. You get the idea. Okay. When you're trying to use your memory, stay calm. That's the answer. If you get stressed out and you get freaked out and so on like this, it makes the whole thing less efficient, because your mind is also thinking about those stressful things all the time and the consequences of if this happens or that doesn't happen. Just stay calm. Take breaks. Maybe listen to some music, like I said, distract your conscious mind a little bit so that you can think more clearly and therefore your memory will work better. Remove those distractions, maybe with the music, maybe just shutting the door and keeping things quiet and so on. If your dog's on the floor, as mine is, and it's snoring, give it a little touch with your foot. Don't wake it up, just a little touch to bring it up in its sleep a bit so it stops snoring. And sleep. There's the segue. Make sure you get enough sleep so your brain is calm, is relaxed, is refreshed, and can work at its top efficiency. Okay. Now, I also talked about this idea of losing words. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It happens to me, not frequently, but it does happen to me several times in a day, say, that I'll be trying to think of a word, or at least talking to somebody, and I get to a point in the conversation where I want to use a particular word, and it seems like it isn't there. And of course, what it means is that you're talking with your conscious, and you're getting feed from your subconscious, and your mental dictionary is in your subconscious mind. And if that transfer doesn't work quite well, you might end up stuck on a word. I had one word, and it was secular. It almost went away then. Secular. And it's like saying, if you've got two countries, and you could say, oh, this one is a religious country, and this one is a secular country, because they don't consider religion, or at least there is a separation between church and state, as they say, between religious and secular. The difference between law and religious law. Secular. Don't know why I couldn't get it back again like this. But then I think about it and think, well, to retrieve a word from your mental dictionary, you need to know the meaning of the word. You need to also find the word in your onboard dictionary. And if somehow it's got stored in a way that's not easy to retrieve. Often I'll be looking for a word or saying, what's the word for this? What's the word for that? It begins with a C, because that's how I'm convinced. And that's why I can't get it out of my memory, because in fact, secular, if that's the word I'm looking for, secular begins with an S. So I'm looking for a word beginning with C in the dictionary, whereas in fact I want a word beginning with S. It's just one of those things. And of course then you've got to find the word sound structure, because you want to use it in conversation, secular. And then you want to say the word in conversation. That country, France, when it went through the revolution, the French Revolution, it became a secular country. There you are. Now, when you find you can't find a word, don't panic. Because like I've said, stress makes multitasking, or as we're calling it, task switching, makes it more difficult, makes it slower, makes it less efficient. So just keep calm. Don't think you've got dementia or anything like that. It's something that happens, and it probably happens more. Certainly for me, it happened more often as I get older. The word is still there. I'm just struggling to retrieve it. Often you can find another word that will work in its place. Now, for example, if the word I wanted was clever, so I wanted to say, oh yeah, that guy, he's really clever. And I can't find the word clever in my mental dictionary for some reason. It won't come back to me. Then I can use other words like ingenious, intelligent, smart, brainy, all those kind of things to get around it. And what you usually find is within 5 seconds or so, suddenly the word clever will pop into your mind, because you've stopped worrying about it, you've stopped stressing over it, and you've just allowed it gently to come out of your subconscious mind into your conscious mind. And the word comes up. Don't search for the word. It's like when you've been out somewhere and you've got out of the car and you've used the keys to open the door and you've walked in, the keys are in your hand, and then something happens in the house, or something, a phone rings or something, you go to attend it. You get to it, you deal with it, you come back, whatever, take your coat off, whatever, get on with something, and you think, oh, I'll just pop down the shops again and get something else. Where's my keys? Because I normally put the keys on a hook right here, hopefully inside a cupboard, where nobody can scan the keys for your car. And you look and it's not there, and you're like, oh my God, what did I do with my keys? Again, stay calm. You can try replaying the journey, because your subconscious will have it probably stored in memory. In other words, I came in, I shut the door behind me. Oh yeah, I had to go to the phone, say the landline. Had to go to the landline to pick that up. So then you trace your route to the landline and there's your keys on the table next to the phone. Because you changed your routine, you've done something a bit differently. So the answer is don't panic. Now, as far as getting older is concerned, unless you're unfortunate enough to actually have some kind of mental dis-ease, when you get older, things slow down a bit. Don't worry about it. Don't panic. You're working perfectly well. I actually went for testing for Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever, because in my family there were a couple of incidences of people who ended up dying of Alzheimer's. And I thought, well, I want to get checked, because you hear, don't you? There's a lot you can do if it's caught early enough. You hear that a lot about many diseases. So I thought I'll go and get checked. I went through the whole thing. Interviews, tests, psychology, MRI, the whole thing. And they said, your memory is very good. And it's better than a lot of people of your age. And there's the age thing. So there we are. Nothing to worry about. So don't worry about a missing word. Don't worry about if your ability to task switch, what you might call multitasking, is slowed down a bit. It's not quite as good. Just take notes. Write it down. Refer to your notes. Refer to the back of your wrist where you've written that phone number, and you'll be just fine. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. It's not worth stressing about. Okay. So hopefully that's a little bit of an idea of multitasking, actually, task switching, related to how the brain works, related to how the mind works, the idea of the conscious and the subconscious. And as I said, if you look in I think it's in the hypnosis YouTube video I did, you'll find a whole explanation about that conscious versus subconscious. And there we are. I just thought I'd share this because this was research I did and I found it interesting. And I hope you did too. And this is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. And please take care.